Once upon a time, in a land where kings ruled with an iron fist and palaces rose like marble mountains in the middle of the desert, there was a simple young woman, unknown to many, but with a destiny that even she could not imagine. The setting was the ancient city of Susa, capital of the powerful Persian Empire. The streets were bustling with languages, cultures, and merchants from the four corners of the known world. High on the throne sat King Xerxes, a man of absolute authority, surrounded by advisors who looked more like shadows than people. It all started with a party. Not just any party, but a banquet that lasted 180 days. Yes, you heard right. Half a year of food, wine, and ostentation, a showcase to demonstrate the king's power to the world. When the event came to an end, there was even a second banquet just for the nobles of Susa. It was in this atmosphere of excess and drunkenness that the king decided to call his queen, Vashti, to parade before the men as if she were a trophy. But Vashti said no, simple, direct. And that no fell like thunder in the hall. The advisors looked at each other. The king was furious. How could he allow a woman to disobey him like that in public? It was as if the empire itself had been challenged. The result, Vashti lost her crown. Now think about it, a kingdom without a queen, a proud and hurt king, and a group of advisors who want to erase that no from history. The solution? Find a new queen, a beautiful, obedient young woman who could take Vashti's place and restore order in the palace. And this is where a young woman named Hadassah, a Jewish orphan hidden among the streets of Susa, begins to be pushed by fate toward a path she would never have chosen on her own. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting biblical stories and turn on notifications so you don't miss any videos. If this content touches your heart and you want to support us, feel free to click on the Thanks a Lot button. All help is welcome and makes a big difference. Hadassah. That was her name before she was called Esther. A flower name, simple, delicate, fragrant, but also strong, sprouting between rocks, stubbornly growing even where there is no space. She was Jewish, born among a scattered, exiled people, surviving as best she could in foreign lands, far from Jerusalem, far from everything that had once been her home. The exact day of her birth is unknown, but it was around 520 BC. What is known is that she was born marked by loss. Orphaned at a young age, she saw life become difficult early on, but God had already placed someone in her path. Mordecai, her older cousin, almost like a foster father. He was a God-fearing, righteous man, one of those who carries faith in his eyes and wisdom in his words. He raised her as his daughter, protected her, and taught her to hide who she was when necessary. And it was necessary. At that time, being Jewish in Persia was not exactly a source of pride. The people were scattered, yes, but they still carried the weight of prejudice and contempt from many on their shoulders. So Mordecai taught Esther to live with one foot in the shadows and the other in the light. Discretion, obedience, and above all, trust in God, even when everything seems to be going wrong. And it was on this foundation that she grew up. Simple, kind, beautiful in a way that did not attract attention at first glance, but which gradually won over those around her. There was something about her that was inexplicable, a different kind of grace, as if heaven had left a special touch on her. And what no one knew, not even her, Mordecai, or the palace officials, was that the king's gaze, the same one that had banished Vashti, would soon fall on this young woman hidden among the stones of Susa. The decree went out like an arrow through the city. All the beautiful virgin girls in the empire were to be brought to the palace to participate in a kind of royal selection. A new queen would be chosen, and the king wanted to see with his own eyes who was worthy of the crown that once belonged to Vashti. The streets of Susa were in an uproar. Fathers whispered in corners, mothers trembled inside. Being taken to the palace might seem like an honor, but it could also be a death sentence. And so it was that Esther, still called Hadassah at home, was torn from her simple routine and pushed through the golden gates of the kingdom. Mordecai took her as far as he could, his heart heavy, and before she disappeared between the tall columns, he whispered, "Don't tell anyone you're Jewish." And she nodded silently, her eyes saying she understood. The girl who had lived among simple perfumes and modest clothes would now be placed among gold, incense and rituals that seemed more like theater. Inside the harem, life was different. Each girl was treated like a princess, baths with spices, fragrant oils, fine clothes and etiquette lessons. But it wasn't just beauty that the king was looking for. He wanted something that couldn't be seen in the mirror. And that was what Esther had. A quiet grace, a light way of speaking, a calmness in her gaze that drew attention without trying. She won the favor of Haggai, the man in charge of the women in the harem. He gave her the best care, the best room, the best perfumes. It was as if everything around her began to give way, without making a sound, without imposing herself, just by being herself. Meanwhile, in the palace, King Xerxes, tired of fake smiles and forced glamour, was preparing for the moment when he would decide which of all those young women would be chosen to wear the crown. The day arrived. That night that had seemed like a distant dream was now real. Esther, dressed in fine silk and with her heart racing, was led before the king. She did not choose the most striking jewels, nor did she overdo the perfume. She was simple, she was herself. And when she entered the hall, with steady steps and serene eyes, something in the air changed. The king, accustomed to luxury and vanity, stopped. He watched, and in a moment that lasted longer than any words could express, he decided she was the one. And so it was, almost effortlessly, that Esther won the heart of Xerxes. A young woman without title, without wealth, without a noble name, became queen of Persia, crown on her head, royal robes on her shoulders. But inside, she was still Hadassah, the same girl who kept a secret. No one there knew who she really was, not even the king. While the coronation party took over the palace, with instruments playing loudly and wine flowing freely among the nobles, outside Mordecai watched everything from afar. He couldn't be close, but he always stayed there at the palace door, watching over his goddaughter, with the eyes of someone who knows that life can change in the blink of an eye. It was there, amid the comings and goings between thrones and guards, that Mordecai heard a strange whisper. Two of the king's servants, furious for some hidden reason, were plotting to kill Xerxes. Mordecai wasted no time. He warned Esther. She told the king on Mordecai's behalf. The conspiracy was uncovered, and the traitors were hanged. Mordecai's name was recorded in the royal books as the one who saved the king. But no one spoke of it again. For now, while everything seemed to be falling into place, a new character was gaining ground in the palace. An ambitious, arrogant man who rose too quickly and who would soon cross Mordecai's path. His name was Haman, a man who couldn't walk without feeling superior to others. He rose quickly, almost like lightning, and the king made him second in command, second only to him. Wherever Haman went, everyone had to bow down. It was an order. It was the law, and most obeyed, more out of fear than respect. But there was one man who did not kneel, Mordecai. Every time Haman passed through the gates, there was Mordecai, standing firm, looking him in the eye, as if to say, "Not you." This burned Haman inside. It wasn't just wounded pride, it was anger mixed with contempt. And when he found out that Mordecai was a Jew, hatred spread like wildfire. Haman didn't just want to punish Mordecai. No, he wanted to wipe his entire people off the face of the earth. All Jews, men, women, children, a sick revenge disguised as a political plan. He went to the king with sweet and poisonous words. He said there was a people scattered throughout the empire, different from the others, who did not follow the king's laws. He said it was dangerous to let them go free. He asked for permission to wipe them out. The king, unaware of the details, took the ring from his finger, the one that sealed laws with the power of life and death, and gave it to Haman. Soon, messengers were sent to the provinces with sealed scrolls announcing the day of the massacre. The Jews had a date set for their death, the entire empire knew, and in the midst of despair, Mordecai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, threw ashes on his head, and went out crying through the streets of Susa. And it was from this lament that the news reached the palace. Esther, now queen, received the message, and she had to face a choice that could cost her her life. She would have to approach the king without being summoned. When Esther read the words of the message, her hands trembled. Mordecai asked her to go to the king, reveal everything, and intercede for her people. But there was a problem. No one could enter the king's presence without being summoned, not even the queen. If someone appeared without an invitation, the king could simply point his scepter or turn his face away. If he pointed the golden scepter, their life would be spared. If not, it was the end. And it had been 30 days since Esther had been summoned. She replied to Mordecai with fear in her heart, saying she couldn't go, that she was in danger. But he responded with words that cut deep. Who knows if it was not for this very moment that you became queen? It was like thunder in the silence, a question that demanded no answer, only action. So Esther took a deep breath. She made a decision. She asked Mordecai to gather all the Jews in Susa. They were to fast for her, 3 days and 3 nights. No food, no drink, not even water, not even bread. She would do the same with her maids. It was more than a fast. It was a cry, a silent cry to heaven. During those 3 days, the palace was quiet, not silent, but still. While the kingdom continued with its feasts and false laughter, there was a queen kneeling in her room, praying with her eyes closed and her heart open. Each passing hour was another step toward the unknown. Each drop of sweat was an unspoken plea. Each silence, a supplication. At the end of the 3rd day, Esther stood up. She looked in the mirror, but she was no longer the same. She put on her royal clothes. She adjusted the cloak on her shoulders, and she walked toward the throne room where King Xerxes sat in all his power, unaware of what was about to happen. The doors opened with a slow creak, as if time itself were holding its breath. Esther entered, one step at a time, head held high, but inside, her heart was beating so loudly that it seemed to echo off the palace walls. The king was there, sitting on his throne, surrounded by guards, advisors, and curious glances. She knew if he looked away, if he made a single gesture of rejection, it would be the end. But Xerxes saw her, and when he saw her, his eyes softened. Perhaps he remembered the night he chose her. Perhaps he saw more than a wife. He saw courage. And then, with a steady hand, he extended the golden scepter. Esther approached, touched the tip, and lived. The king asked her what she wanted. "Half the kingdom I will give you," he said, as if offering her the world. But she asked for nothing yet. With a soft voice and a look that hid a plan, Esther invited him to a banquet with just him and Haman. The king accepted immediately, and Haman, of course, puffed up his chest. To be invited to a private dinner with the queen? For him, this was the height of glory. At the banquet, everything went smoothly. Wine, conversation, light smiles. The king asked again, "What is your request, my queen?" And again she did not answer. She asked them to come the next day for another banquet. Something about her manner made the air heavy. It was as if a secret went hand in hand with the wine. Haman left that night thinking he was the big man, but when he saw Mordecai at the palace gate, standing again without bowing, all that pride turned to poison, and it was in that poison that he decided he would build a gallows, tall, 22 meters high, and on it he would make Mordecai pay with his own life. But that night, King Xerxes couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in his royal bed, as if something invisible were pulling at his thoughts. Then he sent for the records of the kingdom, those huge books full of names, dates, deeds forgotten in time. A scribe began to read without emotion until he came to a passage that made the king stop. Mordecai discovered a conspiracy against the king and saved his life. Xerxes frowned. "What was done to honor this man?" The scribe replied, "Nothing." In the morning, the king summoned Haman. Ironically, it was him. Haman entered smiling, thinking that the king wanted to talk about his greatness. The king asked, "What should be done to a man whom the king wishes to honor?" Haman, full of himself, thought the king was talking about him. So he got excited. This man should be dressed in royal robes, ride on the king's horse with a crown, and someone important should go out in front shouting, "This is what is done to the man whom the king wishes to honor." The king heard everything, nodded his head, and said, "Perfect. Go now and do this to Mordecai the Jew." Haman's blood ran cold, but he had no choice. There he went, pushing the horse, with Mordecai riding on top, shouting through the streets of Susa, words that burned in his throat. Later, his face still burning with humiliation, Haman went to the second banquet with the king and Esther. But this time, the mood was different. The king, curious, asked again, "What do you want, my queen?" And Esther, her voice firm, opened her heart. "I ask for my life and the life of my people." Xerxes stopped. "What do you mean?" And she pointed without hesitation. "The enemy is here. Haman wants to destroy my people." The hall froze. The king left in a rage. Haman, desperate, tried to beg for mercy, but before he could explain, a servant whispered to the king, "There is a gallows ready, that Haman built for Mordecai." The king returned with his face ablaze, fury in his eyes, fists clenched. When he heard about the gallows that Haman had ordered to be erected, tall, grotesque, tailor-made for Mordecai, he didn't think twice. "Hang Haman on it!" And so it was. In the very place where he planned the death of the righteous, he met his own end. But even with the villain out of the picture, the threat still lingered. The order to destroy the Jews was sealed with the king's ring, and a law sealed in Persia could not be cancelled, not even by Xerxes himself. It was like a sword hanging in the air, about to fall. The day of the massacre was still set, and so Esther threw herself again before the king. She fell at his feet, wept, and begged. Xerxes looked at her with affection, but also with limits. The law could not be broken, but a new one could be written. So the king gave the royal ring to Mordecai. That's right, the same man who once stood outside the gates now wore the ring that sealed the most important decisions of the empire. And Mordecai wasted no time. Letters were hastily written, translated into all the languages of the kingdom, and sent on fast horses throughout the provinces. The new order said, "The Jews can defend themselves." Now, if anyone rose up against them, they had the right to fight, protect themselves, take their land, and win. When the news reached the Jewish people, it was as if the heavens had opened. Where there had been mourning, there was dancing. Where there had been fear, there were shouts of joy. Many even began to respect and even fear those people who had previously been despised. And when the day of the massacre finally arrived, there was no silence. There was fighting, there was resistance, there was victory, and it was there, between raised shields and fallen enemies, that a celebration was born that the people would never forget. Victory came with the taste of a miracle. The Jews, who for months had walked with death whispering in their ears, now celebrated with their heads held high. In their homes, lights were lit. In the streets, dancing and laughter echoed. Children ran with shining eyes. The people who would have been erased from history wrote a new chapter. It was in this atmosphere of relief and honor that the Feast of Purim was born. It was not just a celebration, it was a response. A way to remember, year after year, that fear does not have the final word. Esther and Mordecai wrote letters to all the provinces, asking that this day be remembered forever, with joy, with sharing, with gifts among friends and food on the tables of the poorest. Purim became a living memory, a reminder that even in the worst decrees, a new destiny can be born. Mordecai, who once sat at the gates as an ordinary man, became the second most powerful man in the kingdom. And he did not use his position to seek revenge or to show off. He took care of his people, brought peace to the provinces, and was remembered as someone who was just, steadfast, and faithful. Esther, for her part, remained in the palace, but now she was not just the beautiful queen. She was the woman who risked everything for an entire people. The queen who stood up when everyone else was told to remain silent. The years passed, but their names remained. Purim continued to be celebrated, and every time the story is told, it is not only remembered, it is felt. Because every detail, every silence, every risk, still seems to pulse in the skin of those who hear it. Esther never asked to be queen. She never dreamed of a crown, a palace, or banquets. She just wanted to live in peace, take care of her family, and go quietly through life. But the call came, disguised as a crisis. She was pushed into a place where everything was strange, surrounded by intrigue, strict rules, and decisions that could not be undone. And there, where so many would lose themselves, she found courage. Esther's greatness was not the beauty that enchanted the king. It was the strength to put herself in the right place at the right time, with the right heart. It was the silence of fasting, the humility of asking, the risk of entering without being called. She did not fight with swords. She fought with faith, with wisdom, with strategy. She understood that it was not about her, it was about something greater, and that is perhaps the greatest lesson in history, because sometimes life puts us in places we didn't choose, moments that seem confusing, even unfair. But what if it's for something greater? What if you're exactly where you need to be? To do what no one else can. Esther teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done even when fear is pounding in your chest. She also shows us the value of listening, of respecting advice, of preparing in silence before acting. And she reminds us that identity is not negotiable. Even when hidden, Esther never forgot who she was. She never stopped being Hadassah on the inside. And in the end, when all seemed lost, God wrote an unexpected twist, using ordinary people in unlikely places with simple choices that changed everything. So every time you feel small, forgotten, without a way out, remember Esther, the orphan, the queen, the intercessor, because maybe, just like her, you too were born for such a time as this. Instead, if you enjoyed Esther's story and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming adversity, be sure to like this video and share it with your loved ones. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, we'll explore more powerful lessons from the Bible.